It's always a fascinating thing in music, the question of how do you follow up a mega hit? Whether it's a mega hit single or a mega hit album. Do you try like AC/DC to just recreate your hit album almost note for note with each subsequent release? Do you try like Radiohead and just completely abandon the sound that made you successful and try and move in the complete opposite as they did with Kid A, moving from 90s alt rock to minimal electronic music? Or maybe you just double down. You go Guns N' Roses and you try and make something even bigger, even badder, even more monstrous as they did with their Use Your Illusion double records. Well, Bowie with Tonight seemed torn between two conflicting impulses. On the one hand, he felt he needed to appeal to his new fan base, make something that would make them happy and feel familiar if their only exposure to him was on the Let's Dance album or the Serious Moonlight tour. But on the other hand, he couldn't help but try and do something creative, interesting, or at least push himself a bit. It's Bowie, and that's what we get with Tonight. A misguided and rather terrible effort. What makes this album a really weird one to talk about though, is definitely the opening track. The 7-minute long Loving the Alien is absolutely superb. I mean, it is a stunning, stunning song. A delicate marimba track plays lead over some quiet guitar work from Carlos Alomar. The rhythm section is tight as Bowie's voice comes in, singing about how much of history is deeply problematic and the ways in which organized religion in particular is used to justify such terrible conflicts as the Crusades. Lyrically, it is one of Bowie's strongest from the period. He sings in the chorus, "Prayers they hide the saddest view, and your prayers they break the sky in two." As you can see, it's a far darker song than would be found on Let's Dance, and while its production value was something which Bowie later expressed dissatisfaction with, it's still a really effective tune. It channels pop and groove-driven sensibilities into something that's just that little bit more complex, that little bit more satisfying. If China Gal is the equivalent of being hungry and eating a pack of Doritos, it's alright, but it's ultimately unfulfilling. Loving the Alien is a delicious feast. It's a really special song, and if Bowie had stuck with the direction of it, accessible yet interesting pop music, we may be talking about Tonight differently. The problem is, the rest of the album is absolutely nothing like Loving the Alien. I'm not really sure that Bowie had any clear idea of how to follow up Let's Dance, so he just decided to scrape something together, maybe a hope for the best. This wasn't really his audience after all. He'd appealed to far more people than he ever thought he could, and he didn't really know what they wanted. Let's Dance was a one-off fluke, so he took some songs he liked. God Only Knows by the Beach Boys, or Tonight and Neighborhood Threat by Iggy Pop, or more accurately, basically Iggy Pop's entire discography seems to appear on this album. There was no Nile Rodgers here, but there was his mate Iggy Pop to help guide Bowie through Iggy Pop's discography. But in many ways that only presented more challenges. How do you make songs from such a good album, such a raw rock album as Lust for Life, though maybe not that raw by Iggy standards, it's not quite the Stooges, into a clean 80s pop record? So what does he do? He takes Tonight and Don't Look Down, the latter from New Values rather than Lust for Life, and he turns them into reggae-inspired tunes with a ska backbeat. Tonight even has Tina Turner on it, with a very underwhelming performance, a far cry from the woman who screamed Proud Mary and Nushbut City Limits a decade earlier. Bowie, in attempting to keep his audience, to retain them while still remaining somewhat true to the music that he loved to make and play, such as Tonight, which he'd co-written with Iggy, he just seemed unable to find a clear direction for these songs. Whilst he was right that these Iggy songs couldn't just be turned into clean dance pop, so he decided to make them reggae songs instead. Even the reggae style just feels ill-fitting, like a jumper that's just that bit too loose no matter how you try and wear it. It's stretched out and you ain't ever gonna look cool in it. It doesn't help that he's also here stripped the bluesy charm of Stevie Ray. He's gone into the wind, and gone also with the pulsating, funky bass lines. Even the production here feels muddier without Nile Rodgers at the helm helping. It's just not as clean or as vibrant as Let's Dance. Neighborhood Threat especially, which is just an appalling cover of what is a pretty decent Iggy song. And again, even though Bowie co-wrote it, somehow he doesn't seem to understand what made these songs which he co-wrote such great tunes. The original has bite, has an element of danger. It's a song about a neighborhood threat, for Christ's sake. But Bowie sanitizes it and wraps it up in cotton wool. But for me, the best example of what demonstrates the mess of this album is his version of God Only Knows by the Beach Boys from the mighty Pet Sounds. A favourite song of mine, my favourite Beach Boys songs, and honestly one of my favourite songs of all time is God Only Knows. But this version is so trite, it's as if it's a parody, a bad karaoke rendition to some auto-generated backing track that he's found on the depths of YouTube. The vocal performance as well even has all the sincerity of Kermit the Frog, and even then, Kermit delivered more emotionally sincere performances.
It's not easy being green. Seems you blend in with so many other ordinary things.
Than this bizarrely arranged rendition of the Beach Boys sucking every emotional beat from the song. Bowie really is almost a vampire with each of the songs that he covers here, clearly confused and dismayed and unsure of what the hell he is doing. The focus of earlier albums, and even the focus of Let's Dance, is thrown away, making this closer to Pin-Ups, which was his 70s cover album around the time of Ziggy and was a little bit of an unfocused mess as well. And it's closer to that record than it is anything else. A cobbled together selection of bits and bobs and originals and covers and some Frankenstein's monster of a record. The only redeeming part outside of the wonderful opener is Blue Jean, an Eddie Cochran pastiche and an inoffensive rock and roll inspired kind of minor hit for Bowie, but it has about all the lyrical depth of a puddle. I know many consider this to be an underrated minor hit, and yeah, it's fine, it's pleasant. But I feel that the enjoyment of the studio version, at least, comes more from the fact that it acts as a reasonably acceptable reprieve from neighborhood threat, or perhaps some nostalgia to the time, than anything else. So what can we say then of Tonight and this evolution of Bowie's pop trilogy? Well, Tonight is a failed, uninspired attempt to push forward the professional, clean sound of Let's Dance, whilst not understanding the core elements that made Let's Dance successful. Yes, this album Tonight was a commercial hit, there's no doubt about it, it sold very well. But the reason it sold so well is because Let's Dance before it was such a hit, that people were anticipating to hear what Bowie would do next. It's not off its own back. So perhaps then it's not really a surprise that he took 3 years to release another 4 studio album. A time when he explored some more interesting and different avenues, film and soundtracks, with Labyrinth, which he would star in as the Goblin King, and the gem of a single, Absolute Beginners, which was for a movie as well. So it wouldn't be until 1987 that he would venture forth into the studio again in an attempt to fix the wrongs of Tonight with Never Let Me Down.